What makes life worth living for me? Well, let me see. I think Jack Nicholson, Roberto Clemente, Central Park, home cooking by my sister Dodie or our friend Jill, singing and playing bass on Rock Band, a hammock in the backyard, Tom Hanks, Kate Winslet, cute dogs, playing softball with my friends, Bev's face. Well, life is worth living for all kinds of reasons, including reminiscing about the lady you love. If you slip Java into your mug once in a while, or on a very regular basis, then we can suggest Sparkplug Coffee. But what do they have that can compete with Roberto Clemente, Central Park, and Bev's face? Well, how about the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in Canada, for one thing? Sparkplug delivers their great stuff to customers who make their residence in the United States and in Canada. That'll arrive within a week, and we Canadians won't even have to pay for the delivery costs. They have a veritable plethora of blends and roasts. They also rotate their seasonal blends, so you don't have to keep on sipping what you sipped during a whole other time of year. They also realize that some people want or need to drink half-calf or decaf, and they offer both of those. Both Groucho Marx and Woody Allen have said that they wouldn't want to belong to any club that would have them as a member. I might relate to that a little bit, but I can pump up a different club to which you should belong, and that's Sparkplug's Autopilot Coffee Club. Being with them will get you perks and a slew of deals, plus you will save money on every order. And customizing your membership will enable you to get orders when it suits you. No, sir, Billy or Biff or Scooter, this is not a Coffee of the Month club. So it's sparkplug.coffee in your browser. Add HYES with a slash before that, and you'll save 20% off your next order. Go get some. So the time is now for me to go on a tear about a very controversial fellow. Woody, I know you would never listen to this, but I'm going to try to sort out the good and the bad about you. And of course, your flick. More importantly, your film. And action. Have you ever seen Manhattan? Hi there, you lovers of classic films, and thank you so much for downloading or streaming the 568th edition of Have You Ever Seen? We review classic motion pictures on this channel every Monday and every other Friday, and we ram in every spoiler we care to ram into a review. I'm your didactic host, who's on his own because it's a Friday, Ryan Ellis. Bev is off with her analyst named Donnie, although she won't constantly tell you that she's from Philadelphia, the way Diane Keaton does in this film. For one thing, Bev isn't from Philadelphia. But yes, Bev isn't here. When I review movies on my own, I look at every scene and talk about the story in sequential order. I make the odd wisecrack, sometimes a lot more than odd. Well, there might be odd, but many of them. Because who doesn't need a little tomfoolery in their life? And I go off on many tangents. But before I do any of that, I'm going to stare right into the eyes of the great big elephant in the room, and that is Woody Allen's proclivities for younger women and maybe even for girls who are underage. Now, I get that watching a Woody Allen movie isn't easy if you believe he did any of those things, especially if you think he did something to his adopted daughter Dylan when she was only 7 years old. I also get that people are bothered that he hooked up with his stepdaughter, Soon-Yi Previn, then later married her. I also get people being bothered about something I didn't know about until preparing for this episode, that people claim he had romantic relationships with teenage girls in reality, not just as a storyline in this movie. And I even get that people wouldn't feel gunned about watching a movie with this subject matter, even if the filmmaker didn't have any of that baggage. In Manhattan, Woody Allen's character Isaac is 42, Marilyn Hemingway's character Tracy is 17, and they're not just palling around, they're fucking. But as complex as so many things have become, especially since Me Too, I can still watch Woody's films, partly because they're so good. I haven't seen a Kevin Spacey movie in a while, but I will again someday. I'm not going the rest of my life and never watching LA Confidential or Seven again. They're two of my favorite flicks of the 90s. So I respect that my wife Bev and one of my closest friends, Chris, who also happen to be my two podcast partners these past 11 years, and many other people beyond them have said, fuck these guys. Many people in the court of public opinion have made a decision on Woody Allen and Kevin Spacey, and on Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein too, although at least you can say that those guys have been convicted in a court of law of committing serious sexual wrongdoing, and they've served time for it. Harvey will probably never get out. Cosby did, on a technicality, but their guilt was proven in court. Spacey, on the other hand, was recently exonerated of at least some of the allegations against him, and it's never been absolutely proven that Woody Allen did anything untoward to Dylan. I think that's true. I could be wrong. I think I'm right there. Feel free to email me about any of this if I'm wrong. Or tweet me, whatever. As for Woody marrying Soon-Yi Previn so long ago, well, for the longest time, I guess I didn't really care. He said to the press when asked about leaving Mia Farrow to be with his stepdaughter that the heart wants what it wants. Soon-Yi is now 53, and she was 27 when they got married. So she was an adult when she made those decisions, and obviously it worked out. Of course, who knows when their romantic relationship first began? Was she too young? And yes, stepdaughter. It's odd to ever be attracted to a member of your family, weirder to act on it. But the whole messy thing just felt like something that wasn't any of my business. I might feel a little differently if the same story broke now. I might feel just like those who think it's icky with a capital icky. It seems they've almost been grandfathered in, though, with a lot of people, I guess including me, since they've been married so long. But there's more to this than a relationship that did survive. Let's talk about Mariel Hemingway. She was 16 going on 17, 16 going on 17, when they shot this movie. The story goes that Woody made her uncomfortable during filming, including that he was her first ever kiss, not just on screen, but with anyone, and I guess he really went for it when they did kiss. Then after the shoot wrapped, he invited her to go to Paris with him. She wasn't really into it, and yet her parents didn't really discourage it either. I think she wanted them to, so then she'd have an excuse to say, "Oh, my parents won't let me go, Woody, sorry." Again, for some, those actions are enough to say to hell with this strange man. Well, let's get into the Dylan thing then. Did he abuse her or molest her? Bev and I watched the TV documentary called Allen vs. Farrow that came out nearly 3 years ago. After watching that, I'd agree that it certainly sounded more likely that he did something to Dylan than it ever had before. Still, I also do remember coming away from that documentary not feeling entirely sure he did it. Although one thing I could definitively say is that when we were done with the documentary series, I felt bad for Dylan, at least that, because she was either abused or she thinks she was. Neither of those things is healthy for a person to have to live with. I also admit there was a time when I thought that Mia Farrow may have put her up to this. Lied to get back at her ex, not even husband, they never were married, but her ex-man after he left her for anybody else, but especially Sunyi Previn. But then again, you got to think that Mia Farrow would be a sick person to make her own stepdaughter believe these horrible things about the stepfather. I don't think Mia Farrow is that kind of person, but that's one thing that I definitely considered way back when. And part of the gray area of this whole thing is the question, is it likely that he'd only have one accuser? Why didn't he ever do this to any of his other kids? Or to other children he was around throughout his life? If there's been a story about that, I'd forgotten it or I didn't ever hear it before, or haven't heard it yet. Is a pedophile satisfied with one crime that he got away with and then never tries it again? Was all of it covered up and paid off? It isn't the same as what Cosby and Weinstein did, where dozens of women accused each of them of abuse and rape. So how do you not believe that many people? That was the thing with Bill Cosby especially. I'm like everybody else. No, it's got to be a crock of shit. No. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. And I got to believe after even 3, I don't remember how many it was when I finally believed it, but that many people? But in Woody Allen's case, 1. But here's what I learned recently. Allen reportedly dated a 17-year-old while making Annie Hall a few years before Manhattan, and he was with another girl who was supposedly only 16 when they got involved. If either of those stories are true, shit, there goes the theory that I've always had that a pedophile doesn't tend to only do that to one kid, meaning Dylan, and then never again. And I thought his history of doing anything illegal with underage girls was only the unproven stories about her. But maybe I was wrong, and maybe he has a pretty extensive history of dating, and I assume sleeping with, underage women, or girls. That's rape. Okay, now I don't feel so good about reviewing this man's movie anymore. But yes, I still watch the movies sometimes. I've seen 2 or 3 of them since we saw the Allen vs. Farrow doc, although Bev and I reviewed the Purple Rose of Cairo before we saw Allen v. Farrow. I don't think she would have agreed to cover anything this man made after we saw that show. Just like if a few weeks ago I had known about those 2 teenagers he was supposedly dating in the 70s, I might have changed my mind about spending time covering the guy's film. I still don't intend to take my DVDs and Blu-rays of Annie Hall, Manhattan, The Purple Rose of Cairo, Hannah and Her Sisters, Crimes and Misdemeanors, or his earlier, funnier ones, outside, and burning them or driving over them with a tractor. I'm not a sniveling idiot who does stupid things like that just to show the entire world my outrage. I hate when people do that stuff. Burn their own shoes because some athlete says they don't agree with them politically. You spend $100+ in these shoes, you fucking moron. You're going to burn them? I think somebody watching a movie shouldn't have other people thinking they're raging dog shit for doing it. I get that whole court of public opinion thing, where you as a group try to shame someone famous and, if possible, with the power of social media, help to convince movie studios not to work with them anymore, which I think has basically happened with him and Roman Polanski. They both work only in Europe now. This is a power we regular people have, to a degree, but I'm also not a judge or jury. Plus, groupthink is something that has overtaken social media so much that I admit I tend to push away from it more than I might have a few years ago. Plus, it's a lot easier to say fuck it with Cosby and Weinstein, to not give them any more of my viewing time. Although Cosby didn't make movies that we would want to watch or review anyway, and we have reviewed plenty of Miramax films since we found out what Harvey has done. And Bev covered those with me, some of them very recently. She chose The Talented Mr. Ripley and Sex, Lies, and Videotape, produced by Harvey Weinstein, or distributed at least. Anyway, I don't like Woody Allen nearly as much as I used to, but I'll occasionally dig into some of his best stuff. If that means I'm enabling a rapist and perhaps a serial, at least statutory rapist, taking those two underage girls in the 70s into account, then I guess I'll just have to live with being judged by people who so easily judge people. Although if you can't ever watch this man on screen again, then you probably never downloaded this episode in the first place. And if you don't have a problem with him, or you can accept what he may have done simply because you don't believe the women, or you just want to watch his movies and enjoy them in peace, then you'd probably wish I'd get off this topic altogether. I'm conflicted, a lot more since I read about those two girls in the 70s. So fuck it, I'll just review the movie now, although there'll be some jabs at Woody's real-life exploits as we go along here. So, The TV Writer and the Drama Student was released by United Artists 45 years ago on April 18th, 1979. Woody might not have liked his work on this extravaganza, but the film went on to be a very big hit. The story goes, he was so disgusted with this film that he wanted the studio to shelve it, and he'd make another one for them for free. As I was just talking about, this guy's judgment leaves something to be desired. You think this movie wasn't worthy of being released at all, Woody? Manhattan did something most modern Woody Allen films never do. It made money. This was 16th at the 1979 American box office. Kramer vs. Kramer was number 1. Alien was number 5. Apocalypse Now was 6th. And The Muppet Movie was 10th. All of those have been covered by us on this channel at one time or another. This film was a very big winner on Rotten Tomatoes. 94% of critics have dug it over the years, and 92% of audiences have too. The critics' average score is 8.5 out of 10, and 70 of them have written reviews. Woody's directed dozens of movies, so he has many splats, but he also has 15 or so of his projects that get at least 90% good reviews, and 3 flicks that have 100% from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes. You'll never guess these 3, I wouldn't have. Sleeper, Love and Death, and Broadway Danny Rose. They're all good, they're all funny, but those are the ones that get perfect reviews? This rom-com went into the National Film Registry in 2001, along with Hoosiers, Jaws, Planet of the Apes, and The Sound of Music. The last 3 of those were reviewed back in our far-off past, while Hoosiers is a film that Chris and I got into way back in the early days of our defunct sports movie podcast, Scoring at the Movies. Manhattan was nominated for 2 Oscars, Marilyn Hemingway for Best Supporting Actress in the original screenplay by Woody Allen and Marshall Brickman. Mariel's co-star in this, Meryl Streep, beat her out for the Supporting Actress Oscar for her performance in Kramer vs. Kramer, which also won Best Picture. Hoffman won for Best Actor, the script won, the director won. While Breaking Away won out over a few good scripts, including Manhattan. Chris and I reviewed Breaking Away on Scoring at the Movies in July 2022, by the way. Manhattan was well regarded by the American Film Institute. It was 46 on the Top 100 Laughs and 66 on the Top 100 Passions. It was also nominated for both the 1998 and 2007 AFI Top 100 lists, plus the Top 100 quotes. The line was Isaac's when he says, "I think people should mate for life, like pigeons or Catholics." I felt like this must have been one of the nominees for the 100 Years, 100 Genres list in the romantic comedy category, but I don't see evidence of that. Let's start telling the story. I do feel a little weird after reading that whole thing about liking him or not liking him. I do love this movie, though, so let's go. George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue plays over a montage of images from New York, because as we hear him say in his voiceover, he adored New York City. The he is Woody Allen, of course, who plays Isaac Davis. He seems to be saying out loud the intro to the novel he'll later write. He tries many different versions. Some are too preachy, some are too angry, don't want to be angry. But he finally likes the one that ends with, "New York was his town, and it always would be." Bev and I do love New York, and can't wait to go back again one day. We've probably said that 8 or 10 times in this podcast, maybe even the past year alone. We're jonesing for a vacation. Our first scene with the actors is set in Elaine's, the fabled restaurant that everyone went to back then. But apparently the food wasn't very good. It was all about being seen. Woody, Marilyn Hemingway, of course, is Tracy, and their married friends, Yale and Emily, who are Michael Murphy and Ann Byrne, are having dinner and talking about philosophical things. Isaac lights up a cigarette and thinks he looks incredibly cool doing it, but no. Jimmy Stewart looks weird smoking in that scene in It's Wonderful Life right after Harry gets home with his new wife. Well, the Woodman looks even odder with a butt between his fingers than George Bailey did. We know this is true from what I said about Woody's possible crime section of this podcast, that Isaac is dating 17-year-old Tracy. Yeah. The meal ends and they head home. The men walk ahead of the ladies, so Yale has the chance to confess he's got a thing for another woman, who we'll find out soon is Diane Keaton. He even tells Isaac he's had a few minor flings with other women before this. Minor flings? Geez, man, an affair could be forgivable. To keep doing it? Sleazy. But other than the 17-year-old, the people in this movie are pretty crapalicious human beings, certainly when it comes to being faithful, although maybe not Emily so much, but 3 of the main characters are Woody, Diane Keaton, Michael Murphy, oh, and also Meryl Streep, really, if you think about it. And hey, speaking of Meryl Streep, here she is. She's in the movie even before Diane Keaton is. Jill here is one of Isaac's many ex-wives. He confronts her about a book she's writing about him. She sloughs him off about that, but they're going to get into this again later. What he's really there to do is pick up their son, Willie, so we can teach him how to pick up young girls. No, to spend time with him. Here's one of the great shots in this movie when we're back at Isaac's apartment, I assume later that night. And this is a perfect example of why you don't pan and scan movies. Any movie, but especially one that's 2:3:5:1 like this is. And Woody had it in his contract that you couldn't modify this to 4:3 for television. Anyway, Tracy's on the far left of the frame, reading a book under a light, and there's a light on the far right where there's a staircase and a hallway, and that's where he is when the scene starts. Otherwise, the frame is dark in the middle. This is what they call painting with light. Gordon Willis, first time I'm going to say in this podcast. Wow, man. As for the text of the scene, Isaac tries to discourage her from falling in love with him. As Woody often did in his movies, he claims to be a demon in the sack. But still, don't go falling for me, little girl. Yeah. Diane Keaton made many movies with Woody Allen, but here's one of their last on-screen team-ups. Mary here is the other woman in Yale's life that we heard about earlier. Mary and Hale unexpectedly bump into Ike and Tracy at a museum. Mary and Isaac don't click off the top, although her opinions on art seem to be nothing but words strung together, which Woody riffs on later when they're at a museum together. The four of them end up four across on the sidewalk. Make room for other people, you assholes! With Mary verbally trashing every famous person that Isaac loves, including Ingmar Bergman and Vincent van Gogh. Woody goes meta and suggests that Bergman is the only genius working in cinema today. I think. What I think is that's how the real guy felt about Ingmar. We know the real Woody was a big fan of the guy. Plus, maybe he was taking a polite shot at his contemporaries, and even himself, for not really being all that talented. By the way, the Van Gogh thing, apparently that's how you're supposed to say that. Not Van Gogh, but Van Gogh. I love that Mariel is several inches taller than Woody, which we really see here. If he ever wore lifts the way that Tom Cruise or Sly Stallone have in their films, need a little help with my feet, I'm a little short here. Well, I just don't think he has. He plays into his stature, and he's sometimes quite a bit shorter than his lady co-stars. So afterwards, Isaac and Tracy end up shopping, with him beefing the whole time about how much he doesn't like Mary and that he's annoyed Yale is banging her when he's married to a great woman like Emily. And this is where the people should mate for life line comes up. That's an interesting point of view about marrying for life from a character and an actor who got married several times. Little rich there, Woody. Even though Isaac is successful at writing for television comedies, he hates what he, or a comedy, I guess. He hates what he considers dreck getting so many big laughs during a taping. His colleagues think it's funny, but he has his morals, and he quits, which he immediately regrets when he confesses to Yale what a mistake it was. He whines about all the things he has to give up, most of which are things only wealthy people could have ever gotten to enjoy in the first place. Of course, the characters in Woody's flicks are almost always upper middle class, so if watching these types of fairly rich bastards bothers you, you pretty much can't watch a Woody Allen movie. Ike runs into Mary again at a posh party at MoMA. Isaac says that Nazis are planning to march in New Jersey, and he thinks they should get some guys together with some bricks and some baseball bats and really explain something to them. Love that line. I just wish it wasn't still a possibility that even now, today, 2024, that a shrimp like him, or anyone, would need to deal with nonsense like that. But they might have to. This whole scene is pretty funny, actually, with a hell of a button where a woman claims her doctor told her she's having the wrong kind of orgasm. Isaac's response is that he's never had that problem. His worst one was right on the money. I know that's too risque for them, but AFI, that's a quote great enough to at least be nominated for your list. Isaac and Mary, quite contrary, end up cabbing home from the gala. She's always calling people geniuses, and he thinks that she should start hanging around with some stupid people. Another good line. One thing I've often noticed about Woody Allen is that his characters say Jesus a lot, as a swear, right? Jesus, I can't believe that's happening. Especially considering he himself is Jewish, and therefore isn't too keen on Christ. Listen for it in his other movies, too. Rather than fuck or damn, he often says Jesus. The two banter and disagree about a lot of things, but they do start to connect, especially when she picks up her dachshund at a boarding house or a groomer or whatever it is. The dog playing her pooch must have been drugged because that little dingbat is so docile in her arms. She's a very cute dog. They end up on a park bench just as dawn is breaking, with one of New York's great bridges in the background. It's the poster shot for this movie, I believe, or one of them. Gordon Willis, sir! Fantastic stuff. And love is clearly in the air, even though she's sleeping with a cheater and he's sleeping with a child. Trouble is, Yale and Mary are indeed together, so Isaac can't make a move. Never mind the fact that he is still involved with Tracy. I like the way the next scene starts when Jill's ladylove opens the door for him. This is Connie, and we find out why he and Jill broke up. Jill's a lesbian, but he also tried to run over Connie when he found out about them. That was a long time ago, at least. Everybody is civil at first, until he gets bent out of shape about her book. I actually like the way that Woody Allen plays the scenes with the Connie actress. I didn't write her name down. Because he says at one point, you're supposed to be the, whatever, reasonable one, responsible one. It's like he has a certain amount of respect for her, even though she's the reason their marriage broke up. Well, it would have broken up anyway, I guess. But Karen Ludwig, by the way, is Connie. I'm not sure these scenes with Jill are even all that necessary, though. They feel repetitive, especially to just do the same basic thing they did the first time he dropped by their house. And the only real motive I can see is to show he has a son, and then maybe her writing a book is why he writes a book. Otherwise, I don't really know why the Jill and Connie characters are even in the movie, why he needs to have an ex-wife or anything. I remember hearing a while back that Streep didn't love working on this movie because she felt constrained. I guess Woody was making her say the dialogue exactly as written. I think that's what the problem was. Maybe he hit on her, I don't know. Yet I've heard other people say that he isn't that kind of director. Now maybe he mellowed as he got older and that was their experience. Or maybe he lets men go off on their own, but makes women stick to the text. In any case, Meryl made this and Kramer vs. Kramer at the same time. She had a break to make this, I think is what it was, from that. She's out of that story a long time. Maybe that's when she left that film for a little while to come do this. And she apparently much preferred the Kramer experience, even if Dustin Hoffman freaked her out by breaking a wine glass in the testy scene when she comes back into the story after walking out with her family. Woody actually has pretty good chemistry with Damien Scheller, who plays his son. They end up at the Russian tea room, and the kid says he wants a hot dog. But Ike says those give you cancer. And maybe they do, don't tell Bev. But I've often read that Woody Allen is not really a Mr. Cultured in his non-acting life. He loves to go to ball games and eat hot dogs, not sit around sipping brandy, nibbling on brie, and musing about Kierkegaard. Mary's bored while Yale's off doing family things with Emily, so she calls up Isaac. They get caught in a vicious rainstorm and end up in the Natural History Museum. Gordon Willis is the star again, barely lighting them. In fact, they're in shadow, and the various sites in the museum are what we actually see, although I did read this was a set, not the actual museum. Well, the inside, anyway. We only get glimpses of the actors in this scene. Gorgeous stuff. She says she likes how he tends to get a little hostile, and he tells her he thinks she's terrific and insecure and wonderful. I don't do a very good Woody Allen, but it's fun to try. Isaac also keeps mentioning the book he's supposed to be writing, which is, of course, what he's dictating at the start of the movie. We haven't seen Tracy in a while, but here she is at a pizza place with her man. We find out she has a chance to study acting in London, which he strongly urges her to do. Get rid of her, basically. Considering how much he keeps trying to convince her to get away from him, he sure does give her mixed messages by going out on dates with her like this. Shit, man, just break it off! Although I think Woody is very aware of his own character's selfishness and hypocrisy. He did write the screenplay, but I think he's aware of the asshole he is. Or based on what I've read he was doing with those actual teenagers during this period, maybe he's not. Their kissing and canoodling after dinner shows yet again how crazy she is about him and how crazy he is about her, at least in this moment. He just won't admit it to himself. Not yet. And Isaac has to downgrade into a crappier apartment to save money, which drives him crazy because of how noisy and small it is. Tracy, as always, tries to make the best of it, but he just keeps crabbing and says again that he wants her to bail on him and go to England. I, by the way, have used that "it's quieter out on the street" line, or variations on it, many times in the years since. Which is a curious thing to say about where we live now. It is a very quiet street, especially after dark. Over lunch, Yale does break it off with Mary. She's barely hiding how hurt she is, even though she says she knew this was coming. Woody Allen has not been somebody who's had much swearing in his movies over the years, but Keaton throws off at least her second fuck in this scene, flatly telling Yale to fuck off. I think part of the reason Isaac pushes Tracy away is because she's such a positive person, while he and Mary are so caustic and negative. The same attract more than opposites do in Manhattan. Although there's a lovely scene where Ike and Tracy eat Chinese food in bed while watching old movies. They do have a lot of common interests, especially when she's excited to see that The Late Show is a W.C. Fields film, and I think Isaac just blasted off an orgasm. While playing racquetball, Yale does try to convince Isaac to start dating Mary, which is exactly what he wants to do. I guess Yale thinks that Mary can't find a man on her own. She needs her ex-boyfriend's help. I love when Isaac kisses her when they're back at her place and she says, "What are you doing?" So romantic. She actually thought he was going to kiss her when they were at the museum after the rainstorm, meaning she wished he had. And then she says when they're walking around yet another museum, a lot of museums in this movie, that she's both attracted to and repelled by the penis. Well, aren't we all? I often think of the line Woody has when they're going home in a cab. He says, "You look so beautiful, I can hardly keep my eyes on the meter." I always think of that line when I'm in a cab, because I watch that thing like a hawk. Not that I've been in many cabs for the past 15 years or so, ever since I got a car, but I did take a taxi in mid-December, and yep, I rarely took my eyes off that meter. And not because of Diane Keaton's beauty. She wasn't with me that time. After she gets to the school one day, Isaac takes Tracy to a soda shop. She buys him a harmonica. He buys her a float. He insists they need to break it off, even though she's flat out in love with him. But he tells her that he loves somebody else. Hemingway's best moment in the movie is her close-up here. She nicely underplays just how hurt she is. "Gee, now I don't feel so good." That's a wonderfully delivered line. Even though this is a painful scene and you really feel for the girl, this is also the moment with perhaps my favorite Woody Allen line delivery of all time. Not the best line, but the line delivery. When he says she should be going out with boys her own age, like Billy and Biff and Scooter. The way he says Scooter cracks me right up. Although now she does cry, partly because she can't believe he found someone he likes more than he likes her. And even though he has a good thing brewing with Mary, does he even now like her more than he likes Tracy? I think at the end of the movie we find out he would say he didn't, but even now, does he? Hard to believe I'm rooting for him to be with a kid. I already talked about how this relationship bothered people in 1979 and certainly has in the decades since. But one quick question. Why do we have such a problem with a big age disparity? When both parties are legal, that is. Not in this case. Okay, yes. People rail on Leo DiCaprio for how he's always with women half his age. What do we care if the girl isn't a literal girl and both people really want to spend time with the other? Tracy's a bad example because, yeah, she's too young, but she does want him. I just wish Woody hadn't made her this young, because this isn't just a problem of age disparity when she's not even 18 years old yet. I also think that if he was 42 and she was, say, 21, people would, especially now, be super pissed that he's dating her at all. But in that scenario, it's truly none of our business. Anyway, Isaac and Mary go away for a weekend in the country and she confesses she can imagine having children with him. Just keep the kids away from him. They end up back in the city doing comical things with a musical accompaniment of Embraceable You, which is the song that plays over the end credits as well. Although things aren't perfect in his life because Isaac seems very uncomfortable when they go to a concert with Yale and Emily. Mary sits beside Yale and nothing happens, but Ike seems like he can't get over the fact that something might. Maybe that's because these two people who used to fuck are sitting right beside each other. And of course he'll prove to be right as it turns out anyway. And after all the build-up and many scenes about Mary's ex Jeremiah being what sounds like George Clooney in his prime, they run into the guy, and he's Wallace Shawn. Inconceivable! What a hilarious payoff. Of course, I've seen this movie many times, so it wasn't surprising to me anymore. But the first time I saw this movie, that was one of the biggest laughs in the entire thing. What a gag that this little guy is the man she's been bigging up all this time. I don't think I'd ever even seen Wallace Shawn before either, so it wasn't like I knew him from Princess Bride at this point, when I first saw the movie. Woody must have been watching a lot of old films when he wrote this script because while Mary is working on typing out a novelization for a movie, she says doing it is a cinch. I don't know if I love the old-timiness of it's a cinch, or if it grates on me. It's greatly grating, maybe. Oh, Yale, leave well enough alone. But he can't. He calls Mary and asks her to meet for coffee because he misses her and wants to talk. She lies to Isaac about who was on the phone, and she looks like she isn't finished with her ex. Jill's book, Marriage, Divorce, and Selfhood, comes out, and it does humiliate Isaac, especially since she revealed sexual adventures they had, and also how he tried to run over Connie with his car. Woody did write himself as a bit of a shitheel in this, though, didn't he? Emily reads a passage in Jill's book out loud that really blasts Isaac's narcissism and misanthropy and self-righteousness. He later gets in Jill's face about the novel, so another time with Jill in her house, but then she tells him that a movie studio is interested in making it into a major motion picture. The scene ends that way. Is it meant to make us laugh? And his day just gets worse when he goes home and finds out that Mary is still in love with Yale. In fact, they had a fling earlier that day. So he wouldn't date Mary or fuck around with her while she was with Yale, who was fucking around with his wife, but then Yale will fuck around on him with her. Isaac is shitty, Yale is worse. Of course, it was Woody himself who said the heart wants what it wants. That was about Soon Yi, and I guess he did know what his heart wanted because they've been together for decades. They will probably never watch May December, though, that movie on Netflix. She might relate to the Charles Melton character a little too much. Plus, they shouldn't watch it because it isn't that good. He's good. Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman, fine, but I didn't like that movie that much. Although it does have one of the best laughs last year about the hot dogs. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Isaac confronts Yale at work about the Mary situation. He's mad, but this is a comedy, so he still says witty things during the argument. After Yale claims that Isaac thinks he's God, the retort is, I gotta model myself after somebody. Jesus. Ike has a meal with Emily and admits that he screwed up when he dumped Tracy. He says he was the most relaxed with her and had the nicest times. Although would he be saying any of this if he didn't just get dumped? No, he wouldn't. The button on the scene with Emily is when she confesses she was pissed with Isaac for introducing Yale to Mary, because if he hadn't, this never would have happened. We're coming down the home stretch now as Isaac dictates his book into a tape recorder, talking about things that make life worth living. And you know me, I wrote the entire list down, and of course I paraphrased it in the beginning of the podcast in the coffee sponsorship. It's Groucho Marx, Willie Mays, the second movement of the Jupiter Symphony, Louis Armstrong's recording of Potato Head Blues, Swedish movies, Sentimental Education by Flaubert, Marlon Brando, Frank Sinatra, The Apples and Pears painting by Cezanne. Did you say the crabs at San Woes? I never really got what that line was. The crabs at San Woes is what I heard. And Tracy's face. Now he knows what he wants. He digs out the harmonica she bought for him and gets all swoony about it, then just up and runs off to find her. People have run to track down a loved one before and since, but this is one of the great builds in a scene like this anyone has ever done, with Woody running down the street while another classic song plays along. I believe it's Gershwin's Strike Up the Band. A lot of Gershwin in this, not just the opening with the Rhapsody in Blue. In a lot of rom-coms, this would be the I love you, I always loved you scene, and they'd kiss and get back together. But it's too late. She's going to London, and she's going now. He makes his best pitch, although when she asks him if he loves her, he does what he often did in his movies. He deflects by saying, "Of course, that's what this is all about," rather than actually saying, "Yes, I love you." To compare, in Annie Hall, he never says he loves Annie. It's, "I love you." I wonder if Woody had a problem saying "I love you" to the women in reality. Tracy reveals she just turned 18, so she's legal, but she's still a kid. So there you go. She knows she was illegal before this. Well, it's not on hers, it's on him. But anyway. Mariel's second best moment in Manhattan is when she quietly says, "You really hurt me." Wonderful delivery of that line. She's got that really high-pitched voice, and of course she's so young, no wonder. But she'll be back from London in 6 months, and that's nothing if they still love each other. But he's worried she'll meet someone else, even though he already ditched her once for somebody else. Hypocrite. She wraps up the fabulous dialogue in this film with, "6 months isn't so long. Everybody gets corrupted. You have to have a little faith in people." I never could figure out what was meant by Woody looking around like he does after she says that line. I think he even looks right into the camera for a second, like he's looking at us. As if to say, "This fucking kid is wiser than me, and I'm older than her dad," who he can beat up, as he points out earlier on, in theory. I don't think Woody Allen can beat up anybody. It's not clear what will happen next, although what is clear is that this relationship has curtains. He had her, he lost her, she's going to grow up while overseas, and he can only blame himself. And perhaps he should just run away and be grateful he didn't get his ass kicked by her dad, or that authorities didn't look into this and maybe put him in the hoosegow. Yeah. So the cast. Woody Allen made Annie Hall 2 years before this. That won 4 Oscars, including an acting trophy for Diane Keaton, and Woody got his first 2 for writing and for directing. We covered Annie Hall back in the spring of 2015. We also discussed Jeff Daniels and Mia Farrow being outstanding in The Purple Rose of Cairo. That review went up around 4 years ago. That might be my very favorite of his films. Woody has acted for other people over the years too, including being the lead in Ants back in 1998. But generally he only acts for himself for many, many decades now. And he doesn't even do that anymore. He hasn't started one of his own films for over 10 years. Mariel Hemingway was making only her second motion picture, then went on a bit of a tear of memorable stuff, although not for another 3 years. I'm assuming she went to college and then came back into acting. Personal Best came out in 1982, then Star 80, where she played Dorothy Stratton, that was in 1983. It stank, but she was in the high-profile Superman 4 later in the 80s, and she did work with Woody again by appearing in Deconstructing Harry in 1997. Mariel is still working to this day, which makes sense because she's only now in her early 60s. Diane Keaton was, of course, in Annie Hall. She worked with Woody something like 7 or 8 times in total. The next time she would play Woody's love interest in the movie was in another one called Manhattan Murder Mystery. The Keats also played Kay Corleone in the 3 Godfather films. We covered all of those, I guess, over the years now. Unfortunately, she's done mostly unchallenging pap for the last 20 years or so, after enjoying a boatload of good parts in the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s. Michael Murphy has had a fantastic character actor career. He worked a lot with Robert Altman, including being in MASH, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and Nashville, 3 films we have reviewed. He also worked with Julie Christie and Sarah Polley's Away From Her, which we covered, was that 2 years ago? Man, time has no meaning. Dude's been good for a long time, although he's an asshole in this. He's good at playing an asshole. Anne Byrne was married to Dustin Hoffman at this time, and he, of course, was co-starring with Meryl Streep that same year in Kramer vs. Kramer. She was only in a couple other films, including having a very small role in her husband's prison movie, Papillon. Meryl Streep, one of the biggest stars of all time, of course, one of the biggest names of all time, won that Oscar the same year for Kramer vs. Kramer, supporting actress, but we also covered her in The Deer Hunter, Sophie's Choice, where she won her second Oscar, first for leading, Adaptation, very funny in that, and has a small voiceover role in Spielberg's AI. She's also come up many times in our Oscars preview shows in recent years because she gets nominated for so many Oscars. The director was the writer and star, of course, Alan Konigsberg, his real name. Marshall Brickman was the Woodman's co-writer. Woody's been nominated for 25 Oscars and won 4 times, 3 for writing, and that 1 for directing Annie Hall. That and The Purple Rose of Cairo are the only 2 times before now that Alan has been discussed on this channel. And this might do it. I don't want to have to keep talking about his personal life. It isn't worth the hassle. Plus, I feel differently after doing that research. We've also reviewed my 3 favorites, I'd say, at this point. Although Hannah and Her Sisters, Crimes and Misdemeanors, and Zelig are my Woody top 10, too. Still, this will likely be the swan song for Woody Allen films on this channel. As for his direction, it's excellent. As always, he shot a lot of long takes like Chaplin and Keaton did in their comedies. Woody knows, or knew then at least, that funny scenes don't play as well when there are a lot of cuts. The actors have to learn their lines like a play when they're on camera this long. It must be a hell of a challenge, but it does make the movies funnier. The producers were Charles Joffe and Jack Rollins, who produced a zillion Woody Allen movies, and also worked on a movie we covered on Monday, Arthur. Gordon Willis shot Manhattan and somehow was not nominated for an Oscar. He also shot the Godfather pictures and wasn't nominated for them either. Well, not until part 3. That and Zelig actually represent his only 2 nominations for the big prize. Worthy choices, but nothing for the Godfather movies, or I think he did all the President's Men, and not this. This especially, really. This and the first Godfather. Should have been nominations easy. Of course, Manhattan is in black and white and in the 2:3:9:1 aspect ratio. You get to be successful enough, then they'll let you make a film in black and white. And how did I see this? As If You Care? I saw it on Prime, even though I own the Blu-ray. There's a Woody Allen thing lately on Prime. They've got all kinds of his films there. Susan Morse cut the picture, as she often did for Woody flicks. I believe she was the editor for around 20 projects with the Woodman, and she was the cutter on Arthur, which Bev and I discussed 4 days ago. To put a tidy bow on this lengthy review of this wonderful movie that happens to have a messy backstage story, it's an excellent script and one of Woody's funniest movies. The performances are pretty excellent, and the film looks as good as any that Woody Allen ever made, or that Gordon Willis shot. It remains a great movie, and when I first fell in love with this, I didn't know any of Woody Allen's real-life issues. Maybe none of us did. Certainly most of us had no idea. But this review was mostly about the quality of the flick. And maybe it helps a little bit to add this point that the teenager in this film is the most assured person in it. She's way more together than the Woody or Keaton characters are, and I guess more than Yale is. And she's a better person than either of them, or certainly Yale. And now she'll get away from this 42-year-old and meet guys named Biff and Scooter. So that was how I saw Manhattan. In 2 weeks, I'll be back on the job doing a solo show. We've never reviewed an Ava Gardner movie before, so I'm choosing Mogambo. That represents her only Oscar nomination. Grace Kelly got a nom for that, too. Clark Gable's in it. John Ford directed it. A lot of reasons to cover this movie. We haven't talked about Grace or Gable in a long time on this channel either. So that'll be my monologue on February 23rd, Mogambo. In 3 days, though, Bev will be in your ears with me, and we'll be covering Garbo for the second time in an Ernst Lubitsch rom-com, Ninotchka. Greta Garbo will laugh as Love in a Word month continues. If I didn't say that already, we're calling this month Love in a Word because every movie is a one-word title. We'd love it if you would take some time to write a review of our podcast on your app or on YouTube. Rate us, like us, subscribe to us. Our YouTube handle is at HYESEllis, by the way, or type Have You Ever Seen into the search section on the tube. A few more ways to contact us are email, Twitterix, and Threads. Emails can go to haveyouvseenpodcast@gmail.com. Tweetixes can go to @MovieFiend51 and @BevEllisEllis, and Bev is @BevEllisEllis on Threads. Oh, and check out Sparkplug Coffee. They'll give you a 20% discount if you drop our HYES promo code into the promo box. Go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES. So that, as they say, is that. I'm sweating here. That was a tough one to get through. Uncomfortable. Thanks to Pal for spending all this time with me. Join Bev and me on the 12th when we banter about Ninotchka. Meantime, I'm going to go out and see if I can't find a much older woman to romance. Gotta cleanse my ew palate. Let her feel guilty about dating a much younger man. Oh, and no one tell Bev about these plans. And cut.